subtítulos en español para que puedan simultáneamente entender todo lo que se habla en esta sesión. El link está en el group chat, entonces por favor, si pueden hacer clic en el enlace, gracias.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jen Lucier, and as you know, we are Connecticut's Parent Training and Information Center, and we understand that a lot of people could not make it here today because of their power being out, but we are recording this, and everybody that registered will get a link to the video, and it will be posted on YouTube and all of our other social media accounts as well. So a couple of housekeeping things. Participants will be muted at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you for everybody that registered and gave questions during registration. We may have additional time at the end for some more questions. And we ask that you remember this is not a private call. This is going to be posted publicly. So we just ask that you think about that and keep things general instead of naming your specific child and your specific situation. With that being said, if you do want to get more in-depth about a question about your own child, you can contact CPAC and speak to us individually. You can call 860-739-3089, or you can email us at cpac@cpacinc.org. Let me see. Now I'll introduce Bryan, our special guest, who is from the Connecticut State Department of Education, Special Education Division Director.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. It's wonderful to see you all this afternoon. And I just want to thank Beth Reel and Jane Hampton-Smith for the opportunity for supporting this question and answer session this afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all that actually still do have power or some access to be able to listen in and to participate today. I hope that despite the pandemic and the weather that we've all experienced in the past, that you are well and that your families are well. And I just want to thank you for all that you're doing during this time of uncertainty and fear and the unknown. And just a reminder, which I often say to myself too, is, you know, we have to take time to ensure that we are caring for ourselves, so that we can help others during this time. And I hope you have the opportunity to do that in some capacity over the summer months. I want to let you know that we are all in this together, although we have different roles at the local level, state level, and federal level as parents. And as we continue to navigate these challenges, we're all working on this together. And you have a tremendous resource in CPAC, and thanks again for the opportunity to share some information. As was described a bit earlier, the format for today is similar to sessions that I've had an opportunity to hold previously with special education directors and regional education, special education directors, as well as approved private special education program directors. And the first part of our session today will be updates and information that I can share with you. I'm hopeful that the updates and information and resources that I share will answer some of your questions. I know there will still be outstanding questions, and that's really the benefit today. After I go through my overview, Adriana from CPAC and Jen Lucier will be assisting me in facilitating questions that you pose in the chat box and questions that you've submitted previously to help us structure the session for you. If there are questions that I'm unable to answer, I'll be sure to bring those back to the team and get answers back to you as soon as possible. Some of your questions, as I mentioned, may be answered in my update. Others may be answered in resources that we've already put out that you may or may not be aware of. And certainly your input and your concerns help drive future guidance from the Bureau of Special Education. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I have an amazing team here at the Bureau of Special Education. We've been working around the clock all summer long and to support districts parents and students to be able to navigate these very complex issues related to special education. And I know the start of the school year, it will be upon us in the blink of an eye. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, this is a school opening like we've never experienced, any of us have experienced. And so I know that parents and schools have one common goal in front of us, and that's to provide high quality educational experiences for our children and for our students. So, we are certainly committed to support that process. There are difficult decisions that are being made right now within districts and within homes. And we all have the responsibility to maintain not only positive and productive relationships as we navigate these issues, but also positive and productive communications so that we can work together, again, for that one common goal. So I'd like to share a couple of updates with you at this point. A couple of non-COVID related issues, just very briefly. I wanted to take this opportunity to say that some of you may be aware that the State Department over the course of the last 2 years now has been involved in revising and updating the IEP document. And we held sessions with the support of CPAC and the RESC Alliance in various locations across the state to receive input from parents. We have a document that our goal was to improve the document so that it was easier to understand for parents and students and easier for practitioners to implement and to utilize within the school system. So we're very pleased with that product. We are in the midst of an agreement with a vendor to be able to support that electronic IEP, which includes a parent portal so that parents can access IEP documents and other documents that are important to student programming. It's a very comprehensive system. Not only will it support the IEP document, but it will also support other data collection modules. And we're tremendously excited. Through the course of the pandemic and the health issue, this work has been marching along, and we are getting ready to announce the vendor that we will be working with to help support that system in the very near future. The new IEP document and the new IEP system will be in place for the beginning of the 2022 school year. So we still have some work in front of us. The next year, the system will be built, and then we'll be able to pilot the system with parents and districts. And following that, we will be able to implement the system across the state. And this will be provided to districts at no cost. The IDA grant at the state level will be able to support this. And we're really excited about the quality of IEPs being addressed, as well as a system for efficiency, again, easier for parents and students to understand and easier for practitioners to use. So be on the lookout for that announcement very soon from the State Department of Education. The other sort of non-COVID related issue is I just wanted to make everyone aware that the State Advisory Council for Special Education is a wonderful support and wonderful entity. It's a legislative group that is 37 members strong, half of whom are parents or individuals with disabilities. And this group has been meeting very frequently since schools had been shut down back in March, statewide school closures, to advise the State Department and legislators on the unmet needs of students with special education. So every year the council creates priorities, and last month the council, obviously the topics have shifted to COVID-19 related issues around special education, appropriately so. So I just wanted to recognize that group, and Jane Hampton-Smith from CPAC is a member, as well as Jen Lucier within that group. So we do have information on our website and updates on how the Advisory Council operates and what their function is. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We're always looking for interested public participants. The meetings are public, as well as if you're interested in learning about how a parent can become a member of that committee, please don't hesitate to reach out to the State Department of Education. So moving on to the COVID-19 related issues and fall reopening, there's a couple of important information that I wanted to highlight, important points. One is that with regard to special education and reopening, there have been no waiver of legal requirements around special education. That's very important to understand. IDA requirements are still in place and they remain controlling, and that ensures that access and equity for students is a priority. The United States Department of Education and the Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level is not permitting any waivers related to federal timelines and special education compliance. So that's important to understand. We at the State Department understand that meeting compliance during this time is very challenging due to the health restrictions and the public health mandates. So we continue to work with parents and school districts to support the required activities with regard to the IDA. Throughout this period, safety and security of our students and staff and families has been first and foremost. Communication with parents, you heard me talk a little bit earlier about the positive relationships, the importance of maintaining positive relationships and communication. And from my perspective, I just would really like to thank everyone for their patience, for their flexibility, for their creativity in addressing and problem solving some of the complex issues that arise around special education, specifically the procedures and practices involved with supporting our students. And then finally, the focus on individualized student needs is so important and so essential in the foundation of IDA. So those continue to be tenets that we communicate and support from the federal government through our school system. Schools still are required to provide a free and appropriate public education, and that, however, that's consistent with the need to protect health and safety of students and staff. So IEP supports and services will look differently than they would under typical health conditions in school being fully in session. And this flexibility is allowed within the federal flexibility as well. So their guidance and policies for reopening apply to all students, including special education students. And I notice my lights have dimmed, so I'm gonna just move around a little bit. That's a really important philosophy and a foundation that we can't say often enough, is that students with IEPs or students with learning challenges are general education students first. So all of the aspects of school reopening apply to students with IEPs. So that we're asking schools and parents to think about options and creative suggestions for our student populations that have had difficulty accessing their learning. Another topic that has come up quite a bit, and some that I saw within the themes of the questions that you've submitted in advance, is the concept of least restrictive environment. So again, using the general education setting and what's being offered to general education for the students first as a foundation before moving to more restrictive options. Least restrictive environment is one of the foundational concepts and a tenet of the IDA and needs to be adhered to. And so there is often a conflict between that with the safety and health precautions being put in place. So our upcoming guidance will have more information about that in the least restrictive environment, but we want to make sure that that is first and foremost when schools and parents are planning for re-entry in the next coming weeks. We have been collaborating frequently with our out-of-district placements as well. I mentioned the directors meetings that we've had previously. We've been meeting on a regular basis to ensure that students whose IEPs are being implemented by a school outside of the public school setting will be submitting plans and have submitted plans for reopening to the State Department of Education. And the same requirements are being applied, and schools are adhering to those requirements. So there's symmetry between the plans for schools as well as out-of-district placements. Districts are sharing copies of their plans, and approved private special education programs are sharing copies of the plans with the LEAs. And again, communication has been a critical aspect and a critical component of those partnerships to ensure that students' needs are being met. Moving on, I wanted to highlight 3 resources that were recently recently released. There are addendums to the State Department of Education's fall reopening document. There was the first addendum was about parents opting in to remote learning. So that information can be found if you click on the link on the State Department of Education on the Achieve Advance document. Adapt, Achieve, Advance. You will see these addendums. There was also an addendum, which is the second addendum for considerations for pre-K students. And the third addendum was consideration for high need students. So I'll speak briefly for the high need student addendum. There's been tremendous collaboration and resources to be able to support students with high needs during this time. We've had great discussions and collaborations with our partners at the RESC Alliance and CPAC and directors and input from parents on important resources to be able to support this student population. What this addendum addressed was defining what high needs means. So there's bulleted information to describe students that have experienced significant challenges accessing remote educational opportunities. Students that may require close supervision by an adult or often require adult to student ratios of 1-to-1 or maybe 2-to-1. Students who require assistance to learn basic skills around health and self-care, for example, meal times and medical interventions. Students that present with functional communication challenges, both verbal and nonverbal means, and that may have limited ability to express their feelings or symptoms of illness. And then again, mentioning students with behavioral challenges, there's support around the emergency use of physical restraint and or seclusion. And we know that the emphasis on de-escalation strategies to avoid those situations, but we know that emergencies do come up when safety is at stake for the student. So there's information regarding challenging behaviors in the document. And then finally, there's additional information on students who are unable to wear protective personal equipment and or social distancing. So there's an emphasis on supporting students and families and helping to ensure that students can transition safely back to school, different strategies to be able to support that process for happening. And then once they're in the school building, strategies to adhere to the information that I just mentioned. So I want to thank those involved in the contribution to that document. I think it's a helpful and useful document. And I wanted to mention also that we have additional information coming through our special education office with regard to special education procedures and practices. The PreK Addendum, I wanted to mention quickly that there is, that's the other supplement that I mentioned, the addendum to the Adapt, Advance, Achieve document. It addresses class sizes for pre-K as well as PPE requirements, whereas students in pre-K programs are not required to wear masks unless requested by families. That document also addresses transportation, child nutrition issues, visitors, playground protocols, and so it's another wonderful resource. and a collaborative effort between the State Department of Education and the Office of Early Childhood. And finally, the parent choice to opt in to remote learning for parents who choose to do so. There is a section in there about special education. And just to highlight a couple of key concepts, because I don't want to take up too much time, because I want to make sure that we get to your questions, that state and federal laws do not address remote learning as a matter of choice for parents. But we want to make sure that, that this is different, that people understand that this is different than the public health mandates when schools were shut down statewide and there were no classroom activities at that time in the school building. We wanted to differentiate the parent opt-in choice from students that have medical necessity to be home and receive homebound instruction. And it is differentiated from students that are homeschooled. That's a different, we want to make sure that the clarity is there and that the difference is understood for parents that are homeschooling their children and unenrolling their child. So parent opt-in is not the same as either of those circumstances. And then finally, it is not the same as when a PPT makes a decision that the least restrictive environment for the child is in the home setting. So the PPT determining that in-home services. So parent opt-in is different than any of those options. We've clarified that within the addendum, and we are also providing additional information around processes and procedures because we know decisions are being made with regard to that choice option for parents. So Jen and Adriana, at this point, I think I'll pause, and I don't know if as I was speaking and going over the highlights of some of the resources and recent activities, if there were questions. I did want to, before we do that, I did want to mention one other resource that was recently submitted and is posted on our website, and that's information related to children in the birth to 3 system that are transitioning to the public school setting. We had a webinar that was posted a few weeks back, letting individuals know that Executive Order 7DD previously provided that there would be funding for early intervening services for students that turned 3 during the pandemic, during statewide school classroom closures, and that districts were not able to or unable to complete face-to-face evaluations during that time because of the current mandates. It allowed for the early intervening services through the Office of Early Childhood to continue through August 31, 2020. So we put information out to districts as soon as we learned about that end date for funding, and schools are currently in the process of completing those evaluations and ensuring that IEPs are in place for the start of the school year. Again, working with families and working with the birth to 3 providers to ensure that there's as seamless as possible of a transition. That could change as health conditions change, but I just wanted to mention that as well as an additional resource on our state website. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Jen and Adriana for anything in the chat that I can clarify or provide further information on, or we can move to some of the questions that were submitted previously.
Okay, there is a question asking about the verified medical reason, if you can define that for families.
Yeah, so I was speaking about the students that are on homebound instruction, where there is a verified medical reason for that student to be home. That's usually comes with collaboration and communication with a medical provider. That information is shared with the school district and the school district has a process to be able to receive that information, process that information, and then the PBT is required to meet to develop a plan to ensure that the goals and objectives are addressed for students that are in homebound settings. What I can do, Jen, is provide a resource for parents so that they can receive a summary on homebound instruction.
Thank you, Bryan.
You're welcome.
Another question we received is regarding compensatory services. And the question is, how will we determine what compensatory services will be needed and when should these be determined?
Yeah, so compensatory services, that's a great question, and I know that's a concept that is on everyone's mind. We've been, receiving input both from from the federal level as well as the state level, and input from various stakeholders on this. I think initially that this concept has changed since the pandemic has evolved. If we thinking about the pandemic as a short-term issue, if schools were closed and classrooms were closed for a short amount of time and then school was back in session, we'd have the ability to look back to see what the impact was for students and to be able to make determinations on that. So I think understanding that this was a longer term issue that all students are experiencing, we continue to work on this process to be able to provide guidance to parents and to school districts. But we are still in the midst of the impact of this virus. So it's very difficult to determine, but we would imagine PPTs coming together, continuing to look at the students' progress towards goals and objectives, and adjusting IEP documents, present levels of performance, and services within the IEP to be able to ensure that students can achieve those annual goals and objectives. So we continue to work on this process, and I just want to mention, Adriana, that there was a guidance that we had sent out for students that were on pace to graduate as of June 30th and students that were aging out as of June 30th. So there was information that we were able to provide where PPTs can convene to look at, to ensure that those students' transitions were intact. So that we're still working on that concept, and it's something that we will continue to work on and provide future guidance on.
Absolutely, thank you, Bryan. You mentioned something regarding schools thinking in creative terms for solutions so that students access their learning. Some of the parents we have worked with have questions regarding whether or not they can record their online meetings with the teacher so that they can later on review it. Do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if they're talking about recorded PPT meetings, Adriana, or recorded meetings. I think that's a common
instruction one-to-one when they're at home via Zoom.
Okay, so during remote instruction,
exactly,
recording the sessions
so that the parents can later view them and support their children. That's one question that we received yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that what I would suggest for the parent is that they contact the school district to see what their policies are on recording sessions. I know that many of the educators record the sessions so that they can be viewed for students and for parents. I know there are some confidentiality issues around recording sessions, and especially if there are other students involved as well. And I think both parents and educators have been working creatively to ensure that there aren't barriers to that. But the concept of a parent being able to support their students' learning is an important one. And it's something that the schools should and will continue to do. So I would reach out to the either the case manager or the teacher and ensure that the parent is, or that the parent has all of the information they need to be able to support that learning. Because, I mean, we've experienced months of this, you know, from March through June, in that, you know, parents' roles have significantly changed with regard to the education and our supporting students in the home under difficult conditions. So it's a wonderful concept and an important concept to be able to support the students' learning. And the school district, if recording sessions is not an option, the school should have alternative means so that the parent feels comfortable to do so. Or provide those supports remotely from other staff members within the school or team members that know the student the best.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryan.
You're welcome.
All right, Bryan. So we have several questions in regards to, is it legal for a district to reduce services in the IEP if a family elects to opt into remote learning?
So I want to preface this by saying I'm not providing legal advice. So just a disclaimer there. But as described, what I would say is I would refer the parent back to the guidance, the parent opt-in guidance that was submitted as part of the addendum. What that does is it talks about the process and the district's responsibilities with regard to this. And it really talks about maximizing experiences for parents that choose this, this option. Similarly, the IEPs, we know IEPs that were implemented and designed for in-school, in-person learning 5 days a week for 32.5 hours a week, just to use an example, because that's a typical length of the school day and the school year. When services are provided remotely, there isn't a one-to-one time equivalency there because students are receiving direct services. So our future guidance will address the issue of the IEP. And if you remember in my earlier comments, I talked about that the IEP, the delivery of the IEP services will look differently and be different. But the requirement for that student's specialized instruction and or related services remains. So those goals and objectives that the student has, to get to that endpoint and to get to that goal, it may look differently, but that responsibility is still there. The schools are operating under either the full model, the hybrid model, and if health conditions change or health conditions warrant it, a full remote model. That is different than a parent opting in to remote when the school is providing in-person services. So parents would need to understand what they're opting into for remote, what the school is providing in person, and that it will be different, obviously, because they're not in the building. So, so we'll have more specific information with guidance that's coming out in the very near future on that.
And just a kind of a follow-up to that one, there are several questions about what to do if families disagree right now with the plans. What are their options as far as either minor or major dispute resolutions?
Yeah, so this is a good opportunity for a more detailed description or a more detailed question about dispute resolution. The dispute resolution process is the same as it was prior to the pandemic. So parents' procedural safeguards and procedural rights are upheld. Our bureau has and continues and will continue to maintain our processes around dispute resolution, which include a formal complaint process, mediation, and due process hearings. What I would always say is, it comes down to communication in many instances. So to first communicate with school districts talk about what the disagreement is about, work with your special education case managers, building principals, special education directors to try to communicate what the issue is and try to work through that. Again, maintaining positive relationships, maintaining a positive communication. But the specific question that you asked, Jen, about the process or if there's a disagreement with the plan, I guess I would need to know what the disagreement is, which plan are we talking, are we talking about? But the procedural safeguards and the special education processes remain in place, and the Bureau of Special Education is another resource. If you have reached out to the district and have been unable to come to a resolution, you can always call the Bureau of Special Education or contact us via email, and we can help guide you through that process. And CPAC as well is another important resource. Parents should know that they can always call CPAC, and we have a close collaborative relationship with CPAC, and oftentimes can help each other, help support the parent to help navigate whatever the disagreement is. I know when we held those parent forum sessions a couple of years back, I think we held 18 sessions, and we held a few Spanish sessions as well. And one of the themes within the parent forums, not only the new IEP document, we also talked about dispute resolution as an important topic and a confusing topic for parents. So our first and foremost, we asked parents to reach out to the school districts and work through the issues to the extent that they can, but to know that there are supports in place to help navigate the process.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions regarding medically fragile students or students who are not able to wear a mask. One of the questions is, can a child who's unable to wear a mask, does he qualify for homebound? And we got another, I'll let you respond to that one and then I'll have a follow-up.
Yeah, so if a student, what I would say first is to refer to our Addendum 3 in the fall reopening plan for students with high needs. In that that document was designed for students who may have difficulty wearing masks, and the opportunity for educating students and preparing students to be able to do so if possible. And we've heard great feedback from our summer programs that have been in session, that although there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of discussion and a lot of preparation around mask wearing, it was actually really good results, and masks were really not an issue for many of those programs. Students were able to wear them, even students that they had anticipated that would have difficulty wearing them. I think your question, Adriana, specifically mentions a medical reason or a medical necessity where the student should not wear the mask. And then, so I would say there's a couple things. There are other mitigating strategies that can be utilized within schools or within programs to ensure that students would have access to in-person services. And that would be a communication between the district and between the family. And again, if it's a medical necessity, I'm assuming there would be a medical provider that would be involved in providing input into those plans, as well as probably the school's medical advisor and or school nurse to ensure that the student's safety is not compromised within that. So if that student was already receiving homebound services and was not able to be in the school building, those homebound services would remain. And if there is a need to move to that, there is a process to be able to do so.
Great. That last part responded the second follow-up question, which actually was about children who are homebound and who are receiving a minimum of 2 hours. How is the time determined for homebound students? Basically, that was the question. Okay, so Jen, do you want to add anything else?
I just want to hop in on one thing. There were a couple of questions about when school would start and some other non-specific special education questions. And so I would just encourage the people who asked those questions that weren't specifically around special education to contact your school district. I don't know if Brian, you have anything else to say about that, but as far as I know,
Yeah,
they're starting all different dates, and the plans are all very different.
yeah. Thank you, Beth. What I would say is, and again, I would like to thank all of you who have submitted questions in advance, because it really helps drive our future guidance and information. If you sent in a question that is health related, and you know, we're at the Bureau of Special Education, that's not our area of expertise, but I think we've all just been inundated with health information. So we share any health related questions that aren't special education topics specific with our Stephanie Knudsen at the State Department of Education, and we meet on a weekly basis with the Department of Public Department of Health. And so we are able to ask them specific questions as they come up and themes as they come up. Most of our documents have been designed and released with strong collaboration with the Department of Public Health. So if I can't provide those health related answers, or our Bureau can't, we'll make sure that they get forwarded to individuals. So any questions related to that, I will take to that structure and provide back in file format. Beth, what I would suggest is that those questions that are provided, we can post those and you know, have specific questions or specific answers once we receive them. And I would just say, I agree with you, Beth. I think a lot of the questions, or some of the questions that came in, are very specific to the district and would need input from the district rather than the state level. So those are in a little bit of a different category, where the State Department of Ed may not be able to provide a specific answer to your question.
And certainly CPAC consultants are happy to talk with families about their individual situation. You know, and some of those questions may be a part of that conversation, and we can help direct families to the appropriate avenue to get answers to those questions, and you know, who the right people to ask within the district or out of the district would be. So I did put the contact information for CPAC in the chat, as well as for the State Department of Ed. I tried to put the guidance that Brian was talking about in. I hope I got the right links. If not, we will pull all that information out and post it again, so that people can access that information. Jen, was there anything else in the questions that we missed?
Well, I have a question for recording Zoom meetings for the PPTs. If a parent requests to record the PPT, is the district allowed to say they cannot?
Yeah, so again, I would say to work with the district on that. That's another legal question, that districts typically have policies around recording PPT meetings. So I'll bring that back to our legal department. Jen, if we, you know, we'll make sure that we get an answer back on that. But districts should have a policy regarding recording of PPT meetings. And again, I'll say, you know, parents being able to understand the information that's presented and understand the information that's presented within a PPT meeting is really essential and important. And I know that districts and parents have worked collaboratively together to be able to do that. I did want to mention, that I know there was a few more questions, so that we'll be able to get to that. I did want to mention that our Bureau is very close to releasing a comprehensive special education document regarding the IEP implementation. moving forward for the start of the school year. It's important to understand that we're in a different time now. From March through June, there was statewide closure of school classrooms in schools and remote learning taking place, as we all know. As of July 6th, that's changed, and districts are able to open and schools are able to open for in-person services, and schools are working on those models for all kids in school for a hybrid model, and or if health conditions again move to that, remote, so that we're prepared to do so. So this is a different circumstance than it was from March through June. So we are providing guidance around, again, what the expectation is for both schools and parents for how the service delivery and IEPs is being addressed for each and every student with an IEP. We also have information within that document on evaluations around the PBT process and the least restrictive environment, which I mentioned. So there will be comprehensive information that is coming out. The document was designed for educators and for school districts. And so we are working with our partners at CPAC to have an accompanying document with that comprehensive document, so that parents would be able to you'll have access obviously to the guidance that comes out, and then there'll also be a document that synthesizes that information so that parents can understand. Because I know there were so many questions that were submitted in advance about the district plans and what happens in hybrid, what happens in full implementation, what happens in full remote, what happens if I opt in. So this document that we're working on with our partners at CPAC will address those issues, and we're hoping to have that out in the very near future because school is starting soon, and August is upon us.
Thank you, Brian. We have a couple of questions regarding services and IEPs. One of them is it allowed for a district to reduce services in an IEP if the family elects 100% virtual learning or under any other circumstance?
So the right now, and this is I think similar, Adriana, to one of the previous questions that we received. So IEPs are designed as if school was in session under typical conditions. So the implementation of those IEPs in a remote session looks differently. So it could be differently. If what the foundation of that is what's being offered for the general education or the regular education population, and then the specialized instruction and related services that are needed for the student to achieve their goals and objectives within that. If the school district is providing in-school, in-person services and the parent opts into remote learning, then that will be different than what could be provided if the student was in school.
Okay. Jen, anything else?
We have a question about transition programs and what the state's guidance is for school districts with students that need to go out into the community for their programs.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's again so variable. I had an opportunity to observe transition programs that were happening last school year remotely, and students that were working out in the community during that time, students that were transitioning to their post-secondary education programs and that were meeting virtually. Certainly the aspect of learning in the community is different than it was prior to March. But I know teams, schools, and parents are looking at creative solutions to be able to, again, address the goals and objectives around vocation, around post-secondary education, and around employment. So we will have guidance, further guidance in the topic of transition. That comprehensive document that I mentioned will address transition, but it's about communicating with those job sites or those community settings, assessing the student's ability to adhere to the PPE requirements, whether that be in a job site or out in the community or even in the school, rehearsing those very important skills. There's a whole new level of skills that need to be involved, and so there's PPTs should consider that and look at the goals and objectives in the student's IEP, and then determine how those goals and objectives can be addressed within the context of the new situation. So we're asking for collaboration and coordination between parents, schools, transition programs, and job sites to ensure that students are prepared for learning in the community.
Thank you. There is another one. Can districts reduce services due to cohorting so that teachers don't cross cohorts?
So cohorting is an issue that's where I was speaking a little bit earlier about least restrictive environment and the clash of safety precautions versus the LRE requirements. LRE is still a requirement and still something that needs to be adhered to within the context of safety. So again, there will have to be conversations between parents and school leaders about this topic. I'm not sure what they're speaking about reducing services, but usually with cohorting, the concern has been around the location or the site that the student will receive those services or specialized instruction. And again, cohorting is one of several mitigating strategies. It is not in and of itself foolproof as far as the spread of the virus. That's why all of the other mitigating strategies have been employed or are planning to be employed within the district. But I look at this as really a possibility, again, looking at what's being provided for the general education students and possibly a more inclusive service delivery or support for that individual student. But school districts are thinking about creative solutions. Parents can contribute to those creative solutions. Our document speaks to that in our guidance document coming out. The concept of related services being provided virtually while the student's in the building has been another safety, another alternative and creative solution to address cohorting and service delivery. So that the implementation of the IEP, again, will need to be adjusted in some circumstances, and there should be a description of that where parents understand the service delivery, schools know how to deliver the service delivery, and it would be a coordinated effort.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Missy shared that there's a Connecticut State Department of Ed posted a great video from Vernon schools with their remote 18 to 21 program. So we'll have to take a look at that, maybe share it on our Facebook page as well.
Yeah, there's thanks for bringing that up, Beth. We do have a best practices site where there are videos, short videos from school districts or even parents about their experience with school districts and some best practice strategies and resources. But I'm really encouraged from the conversations I've had with directors about the creative thinking that they're employing around safety and around implementation of IEPs.
That's great. And Missy also just shared the link. Thank you, Missy. Missy Wrigley. Shout out to Missy Wrigley. So I think that based on what your comment was, that's something that we're really encouraging families to do also, is to work with districts. This is still uncharted territory. We've never done this before. I'm hearing that districts learned a lot from the first part of the year, the end of last school year, and that things will hopefully be run more smoothly and be a little bit less bumpy, but it's still uncharted territory. And we all know that kids who receive special education services we need to be extra creative and extra thoughtful, and you know, work together and be as respectful as possible to each other. We also, as CPAC, encourage families to become educated. So you all are all here, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir about that. But, you know, find out what the guidance is saying, find out, talk with a CPAC consultant, call the State Department of Ed to really find out what the guidance is at this point before, you know, if there's a challenge with the school district, finding out how to navigate that. And we hope Bryan will come back and join us. We're doing a back to school week, the week of August 24th. So we're extending the invitation, Bryan, to you to come back and maybe connect in, because, you know, things are changing. I started saying daily at one time, and I think they're changing sort of hourly at this point. So please continue to check back and, you know, follow our Facebook and social media, and check on our website. And if you don't receive our email, reach out to us so you can receive our email. Bryan, as we are reaching the top of the hour here, is there anything else that you wanted to share with families? And we have families, professionals, all kinds of different people on the call today.
Yeah, that's great. I see the mixed participation has been great. Just to thank CPAC again for the opportunity to speak with you. Beth, I echo everything that you said. And again, from my perspective, it's been really wonderful to try to work with families, to work with students directly, to work with school educators, and knowing that we're all in this together. As you mentioned, the information is changing on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So, you know, trying to navigate these uncharted waters is a challenge. It's one that we're ready for. We're utilizing all the input and all the information that we can to be able to provide guidance that is appropriate and in the student's best interest, and with the student at the heart of special education. So I know, again, we all have that common goal for our education to be high quality, and I'm at least humbled to be part of this process, to be able to support districts and parents to be able to do this. And know, you know, whatever your district is opening the school year with, whether it be full, hybrid, or remote, the requirement for IEP implementation is there. Know that it will look differently. So I heard the term, what if the services are reduced or removed or reduced, just know that it's different than being in school, but that requirement remains for students to be able to achieve their goals and objectives. And we will continue to provide resources. We will continue to work with our partners at CERC and our partners at the RESC Alliance and CPAC to be able to provide resources and supports moving forward. So again, with the guidance, I would say thank you for that invite, Beth, for the back to school session. Our guidance certainly will be out prior to that session. I know people are working through difficult conditions now with power outages and everything else, but I really am hopeful to have that guidance out in the very near future. And then I think that would generate another session so that we can clarify what's in the guidance, talk about it directly, answer questions specifically once it's released. So I'm very happy to, thankful for the opportunity to do that with you all.
Great. Okay, Jen, Adriana, any of our CPAC people, any last comments? No, I think we are all questioned out at this point, but we will have more eventually. Thank you everyone for signing on today and joining us. Thank you, Bryan, for taking the time. I know your schedule is quite busy, so we really appreciate you blocking up the time for us today. And everyone have a great day. Stay safe. If you don't have power, I hope you get it soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.